Hey guys, Master Xeon here once again. In this video, I haven't made one in a minute, but in this one I'm going to be basically modeling a knife, and then I'm going to go over some of the UVing things to just answer some questions I've been receiving. So we go on our reference images. I'm going to drop the knife onto Blender. Now since this file is a JPEG, that means that I'm able to just drop it onto Blender, except I don't want it on my background images, but I do need the image to be in Blender. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove that. Shift C, put my cursor back. Let's go ahead and turn on the screen cap. The screencast application. Alright. Maybe the mouse needs to be bigger. Alright, there we go. So I'm going to Shift A, add an empty. Now since I loaded the image into Blender and removed it from the background images, that means that the image is still there. So under these image panels, it still shows up. So we'll get into that in just a moment. Now, empties have a variety of uses. In this case, I'm going to be using it to attach a reference image. So I'll go to image, and since the image is already loaded, like I was showing you right here, we can just go ahead and select that RX90 to constrain it to the X, and let's just pull the X to make it constrained to the X. We'll close this window and lower the transparency, and we're just going to model a quick knife. I know a knife isn't very impressive, but like I said, the intention of this is to just answer a few questions that I've been getting. Keep in mind, if y'all are interested in sending me your blends so I can make a segment out of it, just send me a private message and we can get that set up. But this was based off of a file someone else sent me. However, the modeling of the knife I wasn't entirely pleased with, so I pretty much decided to remodel it, especially because I think the geometry got a little complex for an object like this. Usually for something like this, you can keep it pretty simple, or you can try to. The goal, of course, is to keep it as simple as possible. But whatever. Almost done with the front. All right. Now we want to bring this up, make it meet, add an edge loop here, make it meet, track this one down. Alright. And so the next move is to add a loop cut. Not that many, just 2. We'll pull this vert down, pull this vert down, and hopefully this won't take very long and I can just jump in to explain the UVs. I wanted to originally do a time lapse of this, but the person who sent me this image probably would be interested in how it made the knife as well. So how to solve this? So we'll select these two, control click, put her there, and we'll just call it a day and merge those two. And so we have a continuous loop going along it. No need to add one there if it's not needed. And now we'll extrude this over here. We'll put a loop right there. Put another loop right there. And the first thing we'll do is pull this out and extrude. Now, at this point, it's time for me to prepare to mirror it, so I'll just pull it a little bit on the Y, since when I apply the mirror modifier, first apply rotation and set it to mirror on the Y, turn off the X, turn on clipping, and here we see the distance that our two halves have. So that's about good. And the next thing from here is to ensure that clipping is enabled. Bring in that part. and extrude this on the Y. Alright, so use the circle tool with C, unselect those, and just extrude it on the Y and they'll lock in. I want to bring this in myself and connect it there and add one more loop cut so that way this part ends at a quad, and then if I just pull it back it has a nice-ish shape. Maybe we want to edge slide that. That should ease it, and edge slide. Press / to get out of local mode so I'm back with all my objects. And with a subsurf of 2, we see that we probably need to do some more reshaping. Let's see. If we slide that there, bring that part back. Sorry about the buttons. I haven't actually been on Blender for almost a week now. Nothing against Blender, but I have got to the point where I realized that I need to learn how to draw in order to further as an artist at this point. You know, I've picked up modeling pretty good. Like, I think I could make a person. I think I could be better at sculpting. However, those skills are nothing if I can't, you know, build a character. I can't concept somebody. And so lately I've been working on that, so hopefully I can get to y'all with that soon. So I want to extrude this exactly to this point. So if I hold Control Shift and press Tab, it brings up my vertex snapping, meaning my options for snapping. I want to snap it to vertex, so if I press E, X, and then hold Control, it'll enable snapping, and I just snap it there. Regularly it just, you know, goes wherever you want, but if you constrain it like I did right here by pressing X, it'll constrain it to the X and make it reach. Just in case you didn't know, just throwing it out there. Alright, and so the next step from here is selecting this part, and let's see what we got here. Alright, S, Y, pull, well actually, pull, so that just pulls it over a bit, and we extrude to here, and we'll just pull it some more out while also taking this point and this point, scaling it in, and that'll give us that little indentation we see at the corners. Scale it further along. We'll put a loop cut here to just kind of solidify that setup we made. Maybe pull this one to ease the slope. We hit it with some subsurf and you see what I'm talking about. So continuing. Like I said, I know this one is probably pretty boring. I'm sure most of y'all can model knives. So I'd probably, you know, not watch this one. Like I said, the real goal is to discuss UVing. So we pull this one up, and we bring this, and slide this one over, extend. Let's bring this in EY, constrain on the Y, connect with the mirror, and we want to put one loop cut there so that we can quad face this part off. Alright, so turn on the proportional editing tool, start rolling the wheel down. Alright, so we apply one level of subsurf, apply 2 levels with control 2, and we see that we got a knife. Alright, so I probably would want to change this edge flow. So how would I do that? Well, the easiest way would be to turn off clipping, pull that out, and just pull that in, turn off proportional. It's looking a little confusing at this view, so if I turn off the subsurf, it's a lot more manageable. We'll remove that vert. And why is our loops getting so out of hand? Actually, let's not go this route with it. Our goal is to just finish this, and I see it's been 11 minutes. So there we go, we got our knife. The part here that's, you know, the cutting edge doesn't look sharp enough under subsurf, so that's really what I'm trying to fix here. I could crease it, but creasing it would also make the vertices stick to the simplified geometries region a lot better, and that actually sounds not like a good idea. So if I just press I, then in version 2.64 test build 2, that now insets. So with that inset extrusion, I have a very nice finishing. Well, I have a big hole. Holy mackerel, why is it getting so complicated? Alright, remove doubles, turn off the mirror. Alright, that's it. We'll just call it quits on the knife for now. At that, I mean, we could go in and start sculpting and all that, and yeah, that's a little bit more than what I'm wanting to do. I'm also just going to put a loop in here and bring that crease in, and that should give me that. So I'm going to move that to layer 2, and so we have this image here and we have this knife. Now over here in this panel you have your UV maps. UV maps are just different UV layouts that you have in Blender. So this first one, we're just going to call this photo because it's a photo UV. We're going to project it onto the other object. Now keep in mind the mirror is still active. So with the mirror active, that means that the UVs on one side are going to be exactly the same on the other side. So right before I apply the mirror, I like to create one texture like this. Sorry, let me back up. Before UV unwrapping, you want to make sure that all vertices are selected. Like here we go, we'll just hide that, you know, and press U and project from view, and that's what we got from the project from view. But if I Alt H and bring it all back, now I can unwrap it completely. But since these two are back, I can unwrap those, and we see that this just doesn't look right. So all vert selected, Alt H, make sure nothing's hidden. Ooh, wrong button, I think I pressed I. U, project from view. And so now we have just the UV layout of the, now we just have a projection of the knife. So if we go over to knife model, we see that we now have our model and our knife, but it doesn't look very good. U, project from view again, and it looks a lot better. Sometimes when you attach it to the image, you have to just do some resizing to get it to work right. Or, I mean, sometimes you have to unwrap it again just to get the UVs to fit the right And so now I'm making it fit, right? Let's back up, because I wasn't explaining it. So since I reprojected it, it's bigger now. So I'm just going to scale that up. And it fits. Keep in mind that you can also press S and X and constrain it to scaling on the X or the Y. So it's good to know that you have those, because I mean, if the image was like that, like it was when it first projected, then I could have easily went in and just repaired that. And I'm going to scale it in just a little bit. Actually, no. Let's see how this looks. And now we have it nicely photo projected. However, we need to control in. Okay, mirror is not on. Now we have the knife with the photo projection. So this is just stage one of it, okay? You know, you can add this as the texture, render it, but I mean, you know, there's some things on it that probably don't look right. Like right here, there's specularity from the photo, and all of this right here. You know, if you are photo texturing, those are things you want to keep in mind, especially if you don't want to break your illusion. However, you could probably get away with it, but skilled people are gonna probably notice, maybe. So, you know, let's take this a step further. So we have this. Now, if I hold Control Alt and press 0, and then press N and bring up my N panel, under the View panel I have this Lock Camera to View. So if I'm in Camera View, I can now use my mouse button and line up my view, which comes in very handy. So Lock Camera to View, render it. Nothing. Shift C, Shift A, point lamp. We're not going to need to set up any fantastic lighting. And that's what we got. You know, we mapped an image to it. Why does it not have an image? This was another question someone asked me. Not about this knife, but on a different file. Why does it not have an image? Well, what material did you assign to it? So let's look at it. No material. We assign a material. Now keep in mind that the UV assignment means nothing except that you're setting it up for when you apply a texture. So I'm just adding a texture. We're going to choose this one. We'll call it color. And change this to UV so it uses UV coordinates. Generated is the default. And now we have our knife on the texture. So what if we wanted to take this a step further and make it, you know, have normal modifications in addition to color? Well, I'm going to go down to slot 2. Let me get back up again. Go down to slot 2, open color, click the number 2, call it bump, because this is now the bump, and change this to UV because for some reason it just doesn't keep that, and turn off color and turn on normals. If we look at our material ball, it kind of reflects. If we look at the render, god awful. And that's just because we had the normal value too high. So if we change this to 0.2, it still looks very bad. So at this point, once it's down to 0.2, I just divide it in half. See how that goes. Divide it in half again. And see how that goes. Another thing you can do is go up under colors, turn off saturation, because okay, I was wondering why it wasn't reflecting in the material. Now I realized that the material is a color and not this. Sorry, had a brain malfunction. Alright, so we're going to look at the texture. And adjust the contrast. And we're just trying to just play with our values here, see what we can get. I like that, except I think the intensity is a little high still. So 0.002. That's a little bit low. Let's times 2 it. Still low, times 2 it. And that's getting better. Now the other thing is that let's try putting a negative sign in front of the normal value and rendering it out again. And now the normals are actually going in the opposite way. So I think that does look better. I think this looks like it's engraved. Still maybe a little bit strong, 0.04 should do it. And maybe 0.0, actually 0.006. And maybe we want to up the brightness. And that should get us more around the handle, because I see the handle's looking pretty black in the picture. And adjust the contrast. And the more I pull, the harder I get it in some areas. So that'll conclude making a normal map out of it, but that's just from the texture. So we have our first UV layout right here, and that's just a photo projection. It doesn't mean anything anymore. So we're going to add a new one, and on this one I'm just going to press U and unwrap. And this looks a lot like our previous map. However, this is just a default unwrapping. So keep in mind that anytime you want to unwrap, you press U and then choose unwrap. And the other thing is that in order to make the texture a little more relaxed, I like to come through, I like to press Q and come through and just release some of these areas that are real strict. Or not strict, but really constrained. I want the normal information to be evenly distributed throughout the texture. Depending on the response I get from this, I might go through and show some more interest in UV texturing techniques, but it seems that the ones that I use possibly aren't noticed. But we'll call that a day. GY. Let's get rid of this image, we don't need it. And we'll make new texture. We'll call this knife normal, 1024 by 1024, no need going out of control. We'll make it blue. And we see that our texture is not looking very good. I mean, our stretching isn't looking very good, and our UV layout could definitely use some efficiency. So, if you click on photo, it'll actually go back to your old one, and you can just cycle through it. This is going to be the normals. Ignore the fact that it's green. That just means that I chose green, I guess. And I selected all the way to that break in it. And so, you unwrap. Wrong one. I press W after holding Alt and clicking one of these edges. I select a full edge loop, straighten on the Y, GY, straighten on the Y, GY, straighten on the Y, GY, straighten on the Y, SY0. That one didn't straighten out correct. Maybe align Y is better. Just for this, align Y again, and align Y again, align X, align X, align X, align X. They should really add the ability to use redos here, but I guess the fact that it remembers the last menu selection whenever you bring it up again, and I don't have to scroll all the way down to weld Y, weld Y, weld X. So there's our first piece. I wanted to give it a nice UV layout instead of the one I was showing you a minute ago. I changed my mind. Realized I should just go for the gold. L U. Alright, that one's set up. And let's look at the photo. And so we, oh my god. Alright, so we have to go back. That got messed up. We don't want to unwrap it on the wrong UV map because it will mess up the way that the color comes out and consequently the bump. So we're doing the same thing here. And just straighten this all up. It's just impossible to make a video short. No matter what, it always ends up turning into half an hour. I don't know why it took so long to model a knife, but excuse that. We're just going to scale that down and put it over here and hide it. And we're going to select all that's remaining and unwrap that properly. For this, textile distribution is important, so right here, I'm gonna just try to get these normals in a better position. Got some tries here. Damn it. Not gonna deal with that at this time. W line. W line X, W line X, W line X. And if we Alt H unhide everything, we see that we have everything here in our UV. So rotate that 90. And the bigger you make certain areas, the more detail you're able to implement in your textures, like right here. I'm going to rotate it by 90, SY, make it slightly longer, just put it here. The texture is going to look really weird and probably not work out right as I'm envisioning, but you know, it may work. So when we have our green knife now, we have our perfectly nice laid out UVs, especially compared to this one. It's kind of a mess. So here's our normals. We're going to go over here. Now you see that I set up a bump, that we set up a bump texture. We can turn off color, but there's no need to. And what we're going to do is, since this is selected as the active UV, which is normal, we're going to go to bake and bake normals. And that's going to actually bake all the normal information from the object to it. So this is your normal map. Of course there's polishing that's to be done, and there's a lot that's needing to be worked on with this, but this is definitely a start. And we have our texture here, looking awful. I would clone paint around and just get some consistency with this, and it wouldn't even be that difficult or that long. I'd paint that completely blue. But now we see that there's two layouts. There's the normal and there's this. And so if we switch over, turn off bump, render it out, this is what we get. And if we create a new texture, because the bump is unchecked, that means it's not going to be affecting it. Now go ahead and open. First we gotta save this. F3, knife. I've started using JPEGs since they take up less space. Alright, and we're going to choose to open, knife maps, knife normal, UV. Here's the important part. We want to assign it to the right UVs, turn off color, turn on normal, and under image sampling, check normal map. And if we render this puppy out, this is what we're looking at. And there's a lot that you would need to do to treat it and whatnot, but the goal of this was to explain just basically how multiple maps work, how you would bake a normal map from a texture, because we just took the detail of this, the contrast of this texture, and use that to change the normal information. And since these are all shared and stretched, it's there, and since the original photo reference did not get mapped around the edges properly, that is why you're seeing a lot of this. So that's what I meant when I said cleanup work is necessary. Even with the color map, cleanup work is necessary. Like, for example, we can remove this, plus, we're going to call this color map. Go into edit mode, select all verts, because that's the only way you can do this. Click X, new texture. We're going to make it red. And for this one, we're going to make a new color map, because we can't just use a photo. If we were to put this on Blend Swap, we couldn't just put another person's picture up there. They would know that it was taken from an image, and of course that is plagiarism. So we have our color applied, turn off both our bumps. We're going to hit shadeless, which means that this is going to render out without any shading information on it. That's just a photo. So yeah, there's definitely specular showing here, obviously. So what we're going to do is go to full render, and since we're under the color map layout, not normal, or here, since we're not under photo or normal, we're under color map, we can click on bake full render, and this has baked a full render image to our knife. And now you can see why the normal map looks so messed up, and why this part is what you would use to clone map over the rest of it, I guess. So we save this one. We call this knife color. .jpg, and that's pretty much it. So now we have these two images. Let's go and delete this material, and we'll just call this knife texture. We're going to take the texture we had here that was knife underscore bump, and we're going to bring out color, click the plus, paste in. Keep in mind that if you have your mouse cursor over anything, this or this, let's bring this up and I'll show you. In Blender, if you hover your mouse over anything that has a label, and press Ctrl C, it will copy it. Copy, paste. Copy, paste. So that's important to know. So what I did was copied it, pasted it in, and backspaced and changed it to color. Nothing complicated. Remove that image, open, color, UV. This will be color map. So if we render it, that's what we get. If we go to bump, change this to UV, change that to normal. Like I said, for some reason whenever you move textures, they just negative, well, I guess this was 1, wasn't it? And so there we go. Now we have our textured knife. And so we'll call this knife tut. And if we go back and review it, we have our photo, our normal map, and our color map. And if we create a new window by clicking the plus, getting rid of our 3D view, And now we can look at both of our maps side by side. But let's go back over to the default, and we're just going to take this a step further. And that is to make a spec map. And I guess since this video is almost over, I can show you all how to render it out in GLSL in the viewport with all these maps showing and affecting it. So we create a new UV by selecting everything plus. We're going to call this one spec map, and we're going to change this one to normal map. And if we render it out, we'll see if what happens. If you rename it, it'll not rename it here and update, so that's something important to know. And now everything's all good. So we go to our spec map, we drag out a UV image editor, X, and X again. So new, this image, paint, because it doesn't matter. In fact, we'll hit UV test grid. And so that's what we have here. So the next thing is for this material, we're going to, for this map, we're going to try it a different way than I usually would, and that is to make it black, give it some specular, and just reduce some of this normal activity. That's too much. That's too little. Let's divide it by 2. Keep in mind that you can also use mathematic operators when setting values. So that looks pretty good. I don't like all this banding, but that's as a result of the normal map. I would clone paint some of this part over on that part, but let's just get to bacon. So we go to specular intensity, let's see, we'll put one light up here, render it out, that's what it looks like, bring it down. We're just trying to catch some highlights. Now I'm just dividing it by 0 until it's hardly anything. And we'll put one up here. And we'll put one down here. I know this is kind of confusing, but there's a ton of ways you can make it, and I'm choosing to just make it this way. But I could also take my colored image into GIMP or Photoshop or whatever I'm using nowadays and just go from there. So if we bake it, that's what we get. If we bake a full render, damn, that's dark. Oh yeah, just messing with some of these. Maybe it's a lot easier to just make this from the color map for the sake of time. So if we open up GIMP and forget about it because GIMP takes a while to open, we can go up, or actually, I guess it's not. I haven't actually been on GIMP lately either. I've began using Photoshop. We take this image, edit externally. It'll actually pop up in GIMP for me, in which I can duplicate the layer, desaturate, I fight so hard sometimes to not go into my image editor. I mean, I love doing it, but I don't know. Sometimes I just try to do it in Blender, like I was trying to just now. And so we'll just use that as our map. So we'll call this knife spec.jpg, and that's all she wrote. Go back to GIMP. Blender. And go up to photo, normal map, color map. Oh yes. Why is this black? Because I made it black. And the color should be on above it. And then we choose knife color, click the plus to make it a single user. We'll make it a knife specular, and we'll choose the spec we set up. Choose UV, choose color map, choose spec map. Now it doesn't even matter because the maps are pretty much the same. And if we render it, we got a beautiful knife. And if we look at it in a 3D view, we realize we can turn down specularity. And see what magic we can get with our spec map. So right now it doesn't appear to be affecting the ball. Turn RGB to intensity. Let's just see how it looks like that. And for something like this, it'd probably be easier to enable GLSL in the render view. So press N, go under Display, choose GLSL, Textured Solid. And now we see our modifications applied in real time. So it's not giving us a whole lot to work with here because we haven't yet perfected our maps, but you can see that there's a degree of bump that's able to be seen in the viewport. You can intensify it, minimize it, and this will give you a little bit more interactive feedback whenever you're messing with your maps. We'll choose mix, and if we turn spec on, we see it modifying the image. If we turn it off, we see how it's not. So what is lighting our scene? Okay, it's just one light. Let's see. Alright, so if we zoom in on the knife, like so, and just move around the light, we can see how it's affecting the normal information in the viewport. And now you're able to just rotate it around and you can see the light interacting with your spec, bump, and color maps interactively. Like I said, there's still a lot of work to these maps that are needing to be done, but I wanted to just give you all the basic skinny on assigning multiple UVs and then going through those series of maps. And to turn this off, you just go back to single texture, and now you can view your maps independently. The spec map did not work out, so if we wanted to, you know, play around with the advantage of having multiple maps, we go on texture paint and turn on clone and switch it to clone from the photo map. Now I'm painting from my color map onto my spec map, because like I said, that map's useless since I went ahead and just made one in GIMP. Actually, we already have the map, but it's not assigned to its UV channel, which we could do, but I'd rather paint it. And we could also jump over to normal map, you know, and just paint that in there. And then we could jump over to the color map and just paint that in there. And that's pretty much it. We only have these two maps to play with. Unless we were to plus, tab into edit mode, bring out a UV image editor, click this X to get out of the render view, open an image, and bring in knife spec, and that'll do it. So now if we go back into texture paint, we have another option where we can choose just this random UV map texture. And if you switch them, you'll actually begin painting them, so be wary of that. If you switch up which one you want to paint, switch it up there. And that's all that there is to it. So when you have multiple maps, like say this was a human head, then you would front project, you would side project, and then you would go through and paint all those channels. But as far as this goes, I'll consider this the end. If you do have any questions or blends that you want to send, just drop me a message and I'll give you details. Like I said, you could be on the next episode of Second Look. Happy blendering.